The next presentation here in this main session will be self-directed qualified opportunity funds and qualified opportunity zone business compliance, and some discussion of operating companies and how they can take advantage of the opportunity zones tax incentives. My guest for that OZ Pros workshop will be Ashley Tison. So let me promote him to panelist right now. And Tobin Arthur from AngelMD, I see you in the audience there as well. I think we're going to bring you on stage in just a moment or two here. Let me confirm with Ashley once he gets on. There you go, Ashley. Why don't you introduce us? Tobin, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, I'm Tobin Arthur, the founder of AngelMD, and really excited to be here today and joining Ashley in this talk. And I'll come in at the end and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A, but just talking about how to leverage OZs into operating companies. In our particular case, we focus on healthcare, but we'll touch on that a little bit more at the end of Ashley's talk.
So thanks, Tobin, and thanks, Jimmy. I really appreciate the opportunity, as always, to be a part of OZ Pitch Day. As always, you do an excellent job. It's a tough act to following Greg Genovese, but
tell you what, man, yeah, he's pretty good.
And hopefully, everybody and hopefully we'll keep everybody awake after they're processing their food after the lunch break, that kind of thing. But what I wanted to talk about, and as part of kind of this workshop, is tales from the opportunity zone strategy calls that we've had. So at ozpros.com, we've got a process for how we deliver qualified opportunity funds, so self-directed qualified opportunity funds and qualified opportunity zone businesses. And part of that initial process is we do a strategy call with folks. And so we've had the fortunate opportunity to have over 600 of those strategy calls at this point, and we set up over 500 qualified opportunity fund and qualified opportunity zone business entities. And so it's been really fun to talk to folks from around the country, quite frankly, around the world, with some of the territories, and to hear some of the questions and some of the things that continue to pop up. So I thought it'd be cool to maybe flush out some of those and to tell some war stories from the strategy calls, if you will, so that I think that a lot of times people can glean information and kind of glean some other stuff from those, and it also presents some questions that we're working on relative to kind of stump the teacher, if you will. I actually had one of those questions on a call that I just wrapped up not long before this call from Ryan up in Massachusetts. And being in Massachusetts and me being down here in North Carolina, we're one of the 4 states that is actually exempted out of the opportunity zone legislation. And so his specific question was, even because we are exempted out, what happens with depreciation recapture as it relates to state taxes when you've held for 10 years? And so that's one of the things that we're fleshing out right now, which is actually very relevant. Hopefully, maybe that conversation will impact some of the conversations that I'm trying to have with some legislatures here in North Carolina to actually get the opportunity zone rules and the laws back on the books here, so that way we don't have to go through this exercise in those states. But for the ones that do, like California and Massachusetts, we're gonna have a specific roadmap about how you're going to handle kind of depreciation recapture in the context of what you're doing. And effectively, you're going to process it like you would be paying federal taxes, and then that's going to impact your state taxes. But more to come on that as we flesh out these similar kind of questions in a new program that we're going to be rolling out called the OZ Pros Compliance Bootcamp. And that starts on November 16th. And it's basically going to be a 90-minute call where we do similar questions to this, where we go through strategy, where we go through compliance issues, and we deal with stuff exactly like that. And if we can't unpack it on the call, we're going to get expert either into the next call, or we're going to get those answered and we're going to have the answers for the next call. And so this is how we're trying to deal with kind of the ongoing compliance piece. That's one of the other issues that continues to come up in the strategy calls, is that people are asking about, okay, how do I asset test twice annually? When do I need to asset test? And what's it look like as we do that? And so we're putting together a compliance bootcamp in order to be able to facilitate that. And if you go to ozpros.com and you go to the education tab there, the compliance bootcamp is underneath that. We've got a video that explains it, and then there's a sign up link on there as well. One of the other things that continues to come up on the calls is crypto. And that's all different subjects relative to crypto. That's okay. Hey, I've got substantial pent up capital gains inside of my crypto. How do I go about, like what's some of the best strategies for being able to harvest that? And we walk them through how opportunity zones are an excellent way to be able to do that. Whether you go into one of the funds that's pitching on OZ Pitch Day, or whether you set up your self-directed fund in order to kind of capitalize on those gains, this is certainly something that a lot of people are looking at as we're coming into year end. So they're evaluating, they're saying, wow, Bitcoin got up to $66,000 per Bitcoin. I'm going to start harvesting some of those gains, whether it's in Bitcoin or whether it's in some of the other ones. And I'm going to now take those gains, I'm going to roll them into my own QOF, or I'm going to roll them into one of the folks that's presenting here today. And if it's my own QOF, that's going to buy me time, and that's going to buy me time to drop the cash down into an actual project, which kind of leads me to the second issue, which is and another ongoing issue that continues to pop up on the calls. It's when do I have to put my money to work? And so we've got kind of a neat little graphic on here, and I'm going to share my screen here. For those folks that are wanting to take advantage of the 10% step up in basis, there's that December 31st deadline. So if you set up a fund and you drop your cash in to a fund anytime between now and the end of the year, in order to take advantage of that 10% step up in basis, you have effectively started your clock. So that's your birthday for your fund. And that's going to be where you're going to have the 10-year time frame relative to when you need to hold in order to get the step up in basis to fair market value. But you don't have to deploy that cash before December 31st. Now, you will have an asset test on December 31st, but if it's still held in cash or cash equivalent, which would include a loan of under 18 months or less. So that's one of the other things that we regularly kind of handle on strategy calls, is that you can drop your money into your QOF, and then you can loan the money right back out to yourself so that you can deploy it into crypto assets, or you can deploy it into whatever it is that you like, that's going to be earning more than what you're going to make at your fund bank account level. Now, if you do that, you need to be prepared, and you need to make sure that you've got liquidity so that you can get the money back into the fund by June 30th of next year, because that's when your money needs to get deployed. And so we've got a lot of folks that are looking at the possibility of setting up their own fund. And then there's other, funds out there that have their own QOZBs. So there's a QOZB and a QOF that's let's call it an institutional fund. And they are set up, right, for being able to accommodate money coming in either to their fund, or money could come from your QOF directly into that QOZB. And that's actually, I think, a great segue for us to introduce Tobin and for us to talk about AngelMD, because that's specifically one of the things and one of the reasons why I think Tobin ended up setting up as a QOZB, so that they could accommodate cash that's coming into a fund that then wants to invest into their QOZB, which is AngelMD. So Tobin, tell me about kind of the experience relative to your mindset and some of the factors that you were thinking about as the reason why you determined that you wanted to become a QOZB.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ashley. It's exactly as you mentioned. We're new to the OZ concept, and thanks to you and Jimmy and Will Walker of Hall Venture Partners for exposing us. But as we leaned in, this was a foreign concept. We'd heard the term, probably like a lot of people, and we thought, while this has been utilized for real estate predominantly, and that's what most people are familiar with, we saw there's an opportunity to leverage the same mechanisms for operating companies. And so as you educated us on this process, we saw that if we went through some steps and got qualified as a company ourselves, we could in fact, provide that benefit to potential investors into AngelMD directly. And also now through funds that we sponsor, we have the opportunity to establish those as OZ funds, and subsequently, and by the way, as we'll get into a little bit, this is all still, challenging for a group like ourselves that are focused on operating in our area of expertise. So it's better for us to have resources and people that this is what they do all day long, to say, how can you help us to stay compliant? And subsequently, in our case, we have the largest network of medical startups in the world. And so for people that want to allocate assets into healthcare, we want to provide fund opportunities that leverage OZs. But yes, as the more we learn, the more we realize this is a tool that absolutely should be in the toolbox of every operating company where it's relevant.
So not only, so I want to make sure I'm clear on that. So you're not only, turning AngelMD into a QOZB, but then you're also kind of explaining this and walking through some of your portfolio companies / what do you call those? You call those client companies?
Yeah, they're the members of our network. Some of them are portfolio companies where funds that we sponsor have invested in those, but there's thousands of these companies, of which we obviously haven't invested in thousands. And so they are all potential portfolio companies. And, as you've educated us, not all of them are going to be eligible to convert to an OZ operating company, but certainly plenty of them are. And so now through education, we're exposing those companies to, again, this is a tool that should be in their toolbox, and it opens up an opportunity for us when we sponsor funds to now select those funds. And to the litmus test that you mentioned a moment ago, 90% of the assets of that given fund need to go into companies that are OZ qualified.
Correct. So, and I think that we had also talked about the possibility of even setting up a more like an incubator / accelerator where you could actually provide real estate, and you could provide a place for these, startups / high growth companies to be housed. And then you could provide them with resources, not only about how to do the process, but then to stay compliant, and then to be able to assist them with their capital raising efforts through other opportunity funds, including your own fund, correct?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, there's a real estate opportunity here. And, if we look back 10 years ago, most startups, let alone specifically healthcare startups, came from only a couple cities. It was San Francisco, it was Boston, it was the deep pools. But through technology and the evolution of everything, these companies could now be just as easily in Bozeman, Montana, or in Idaho, or you name it. And so as we identify real estate opportunities, and we are unique in the sense that we're the largest connector effectively of all the players in healthcare innovation that exists. So it would be a natural for us to set up a real estate component to this. But in the meantime, we work with other incubators and so forth around the country. But this is, the thing we love about healthcare is the macro trend is huge, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, so I'm seeing in the chat that that Mark Smith is saying that at Michigan HQ that they're doing something similar, and I think that that's the relevant conversation here, is that not only can a venture company and somebody that's set up for you to be the angel, an angel and a source of angel investments and coordinating angel investments, but also anybody that's got real estate, anybody that is a community organization that has growth companies and that has startup companies that need capital on the mind, that they would be not, and I don't want to say crazy, but they should definitely look at opportunity zones and should look at a way for them to be able to facilitate access to the information about this and the resources and everything else. Jimmy and I have a partner, Chris Cooley, and I think that they're actually going to be hosting the happy hour. And I think that you're going to be there as well today. And the Ozworks group provides programming specifically for these types of organizations and for these types of properties, to where if you've got the real estate and if you've got the desire that that you can ultimately utilize and tap into the Ozworks group programming in order to be able to provide nationwide opportunity zone information, resources, programming, et cetera, for your co-working facility. And so whether that's dirt or whether that's, an actual institution, talk to Chris Cooley about that. Jimmy, I don't know what happened to Tobin. And so I think that I could go back into, while we're waiting on him to jump back in.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to Tobin either. It looks like he just disconnected. I still have him on as a panelist. So when he rejoins, he should just pop up. But yeah, continue without him for the moment if you
Yeah,
could.
because I want to ask him. What kind of brain damage it was to actually become a QOZB, and I want him to walk through that, because that's one of the other questions that I get on a regular basis. Is okay, what's the downside, right? So how much brain damage is this going to cost me, both from a setup standpoint and from a compliance standpoint, and then what's the cost benefit analysis on that? And so on the setup and on that compliance piece, effectively you're going to have to pay for setting up your entities as a QOF and a QOZB. We've got a package at OZ Pros that does that. I know there's other groups that do that as well, but it's fairly minimal. Our fee for that is $6,000, and we handle it all, right? So from soup to nuts. Then, each entity is going to need to file a tax return, both the QOF and the QOZB level. And so it may cost you, $2,000 to $2,500 per entity to do that. So, you're looking at possibly $5,000 a year. And so you add that up over 10 years, you're looking at around $50,000 plus, your 6 on the front. Let's round it up to 60. Then what you do is you divide that by 23.8. And that's at current capital gains rates. But at potential future capital gains rates, it's going to drive this number even further south. But when you divide that by that 23.8%, if you think that you're roughly going to make more than $160,000, $170,000 in capital gains in the future, opportunity zones become the quintessential hedge. I know that you would like that one, Jimmy, for how you can hedge against capital gains rates going up. Because if you think that you're going to make more than $170,000 at current capital gains rates, it makes sense to invest the money to do that. But at future potentially increased capital gains rates, that number goes way down. And so, as you can see, if you think that you're going to make substantial amounts of money, it's a kind of a no-brainer relative to the cost benefit analysis. But I wanted to ask you, Tobin, as somebody who's been through it and as somebody who's going through it right now, what kind of brain damage was it to become a QOZB?
It was actually relatively easy. And, to be frank, it's because you and your team have the expertise. For companies that are operating. I know
I was teeing you up, but, I want to hear about the brass tacks, right? So, we're easy. What about the other stuff? Like finding space, finding real estate, doing that kind of stuff. How hard was that?
It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't particularly difficult. So in our particular case, we looked at OZ, relevant real estate in our immediate area. And we had resources that just happened to be through relationships in Provo, Utah. And so it was a little easier for us to put operations in a location where we had other operating things going on, companies in the Salt Lake City area. So in our case, we're using a Regus office space to get started. That may evolve over time into some additional physical real estate. But frankly, that was the most time-consuming piece, was just sourcing that, figuring that out. And that's partly why for the companies in our network, we're going to be providing that education, because we need them to focus on building their businesses, not on these ancillary elements, even though they can be extremely helpful. Then the paperwork side of it was, of course, providing all the corporate paperwork and getting that situated. But from a time perspective, we're talking less than 10 hours of work.
Awesome. Tell us about kind of what you're doing. So, and I'm going to share my screen here for a second, because I want to go through these 5 tests at the QOZB level. And I want to walk through that and about how you're dealing with those, and particularly that 50% test. Yeah. Right. So we talked about, and you hit the 70-30 test. And, one of the ways that you're hitting that 70-30 test is through your lease, right? Yep. And we talked about this as well. And I think that you kind of went with a base lease up front, but one of the techniques that you can do in order to get that 70% good asset number up is by entering into a lease with a number of extended options that have number values associated with those options, because every single year that has a number is going to count towards your net present value calculator towards coming up with the lease number that's in here. And that's one of the exercises that we did, was we did that NPV calculation so that you could put that number inside of your asset test for here. What other, asset wise, that kind of thing, you're pretty light, correct?
Yeah, the two biggest things for companies like ours are going to be labor and lease, as you
Yep.
mentioned. And I think this is true of most of the companies that are going to be relatively easy to convert over to OZ companies. If they've got big capital, investments and expenditures in a particular physical area, that's going to be a challenge. But the beauty is a lot of startups and early stage companies are going to be, technology based and somewhat virtual. So in our case, and COVID certainly accentuated this. By the way, I apologize. This was the first computer crash I've literally had since COVID. So in 2 years, all of a sudden the computer's blank. But in any event,
The way it goes.
Invariably, it's of course. So with the fact that our team has been largely virtual, we had to pick a location where we can start to host management team meetings, board meetings, and also begin to hire as we start to hire some physical staff again. And for us, again, Provo was a good central spot. It's a booming market. It's a great healthcare market in our particular case, and it's also reasonably central. And so back to your question, as we hire, we will start hiring in the Salt Lake City area, and those folks will be leveraging the office space we have there. I do expect this to iterate. As we grow and the team expands, we may be looking at more permanent office space in that particular area. But to get started and to get our boots on the ground, having a flexible, business like a Regis or a WeWork made a lot of sense to get going quickly.
Okay, so great. So you got your lease, and now you're going to have your employees be working out of that leased space that's in the opportunity zone. How are you going to track that? And how are you going to come up with kind of the documentation for showing this specific test? And we regularly talk about this, kind of about the spectrum of what they're going to do. Are you going the ankle bracelet route with your employees?
They don't know it, but they already have the ankle bracelets. So yeah, we will have a little bit of extra documentation requirements. So even the physical employees in that area will be logging when they're physically in the office, when meetings are being hosted. Now we have the advantage, like a lot of folks, we use centralized calendaring. And so that's another form of documentation where we can log that meetings were being hosted and where they're being hosted. The same is going to be true and a little bit more of just a logging requirement for our remote team. So as we're traveling and having those physical visits, we'll want all of that to be logged so that we're meeting the litmus test on an annual basis moving forward.
Fantastic. So any other kind of things, and I guess kind of, things to be wary of, anything that kind of surprised you along the process?
Not necessarily, although, as we got into the ratios and the logging, this is not stuff that we want to take lightly. We want to anticipate, we always take the perspective because we are in a financial business that we're going to be audited. And so we want to be proactive. We want to overspend in terms of time and money to make sure that those things are done proactively. And again, for us, and really for companies in our network, we like to advocate, stick to your knitting. And so if you're a technology company building technology, don't become an OZ expert. You need to get aware enough to manage the process, but ultimately you have folks that do this. We also like to eat our own dog food. So if we advocate something to the thousands of companies in our network, we're going to make sure we're doing it ourselves first. And we're going to work through some of the kinks. And as we come up with, for example, just on the auditing and the tracking component, we're going to come up with best practices, and we'll share those with our network over time to say, here's what's not working, here's what is working, so they don't have, we don't feel like it makes a lot of sense for 2,500 companies to have to learn the same lessons over and over. We'll do it once and we'll share it with all 2,500. And then certainly for those companies that are actual portfolio companies, we're going to lean in a little bit closer and help them even more directly.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we try to do at OZ Pros. Both within the actual OZ Pros and the Opportunity DB and the Osworks group as well. It's all about taking stuff that we learned from one person's kind of black eyes and going through the morass of doing it, and then short circuiting that learning process for other folks in order to cut down on the amount of brain damage that it takes in order to get there. So
Well, and one of the groups that, was actually how we met you guys was through Will Walker and the Hall Venture Partners,
Sure.
and they are in Provo. So that was one of the reasons why we selected Provo, because these guys have been an OZ-based organization. They're operating companies, they're opportunity zone based, obviously. And so we're learning from them and taking advantage of that. And Will's going to join us, I think, later in a breakout room after, or in the receptions afterwards, to talk about, what are they learning and what are they doing as operating companies to take advantage of the opportunity zone tax benefits. So they've been a great resource for us. And frankly, that's how this came together.
Sure. One of the things that Hall is doing and that they've done relative to, kind of being an opportunity zone business company and needing to raise capital or wanting to raise kind of some different types of capital that's out there that may or may not be opportunity zone capital is, I know that they did a bridge loan relative to funding prior to going public. So let's talk about the going public piece of this.
Yeah.
So, what's in the cards there for AngelMD and for some of your other companies that you've got?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. You actually educated us on this. In terms of AngelMD, we are driving to an IPO or an exit here in the next 24 or 36 months. Now, operating companies never completely control that process, but we do certain things to get ourselves on track to do that. But as you educated us, particularly as OZ investment dollars come in, there's a benefit to those investors who may want to sit on that investment for the 10-year cycle. And so if we simply sold the company, that may truncate that. Now, if it's a great exit, people may be happy to take the tax hit at that point. But in terms of creating optionality, we are absolutely looking at an IPO. There's a company that's always been our predicate called Doximity. They went public about 4 months ago and are now sitting at a $15 billion market cap. And so we look at that and say, we need to execute. It's clearly shown there's a huge market for this. And if we go the public route, it gives our investors the opportunity to continue to sit on that investment, let it mature, and they basically create optionality. And so part of our job for our shareholders is to create that optionality. And then subsequently for companies in our network, we feel like there's an enormous lack of public companies, particularly in the healthcare space. More and more companies have opted to stay private longer and longer. And we're going to, through our network, try to create opportunities for more of these companies to get public, allow public investors who want to have liquidity in and out of these businesses to have that optionality. I mean, we're sitting at less than half of the public companies today than existed 20 years ago. And so, the options are far more limited. So this parlays all, back into investors coming in through OZ funds, having that optionality to sit on that investment longer.
Awesome. So have you closed out that round relative to your pre-IPO? Or are you still?
No, we're raising another round. It's a small round now. We're going to close it up in the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to do a larger institutional round next year that gets us on that track. So we've got a couple steps left, a lot of work to do. And so, we're happy to talk a little bit about anybody that's got interest in, operating companies, and then specifically healthcare. We've also got some materials and white paper. If you don't mind, I'll just share a link if anybody'd like. We've got a little white paper on investing in healthcare if you want to learn a little bit about that, and then happy to chat afterwards in the lounge. But it's a fun space. It's a great space. And, if you've got interest outside of real estate, this is something worth looking into.
Tobin, thank you again. It's been fantastically illustrative for kind of going through some of the things. It's been a pleasure working with you, and look forward to seeing where AngelMD goes as one of these kind of, on the horizon public QOZBs that'll be out there. Jimmy, I think we got some Q&A in the waiting room. Which one do you want to hit first?
We do. Yeah. So I want to hit the one that Mary asked a couple hours ago, and I did a poor job answering it. And I told her, okay, Ashley will be in here in a couple hours. I'll throw it at him. So Mary, this one's for you. Mary asked,
Stump the Teacher one.
Yeah, pretty much. So she says, a 1031, you can't purchase property from yourself. What about with an OZ fund? Can a qualified opportunity fund that you are a partner in purchase property that you own and put it into an OZ development? I know there's some related party transaction rules there. Can you walk us through that, Ashley?
Yeah, so there's two places where related party rules kick in, and that's where you generate your capital gain. So you can't make a hand turkey NFT and sell it to your mom for $1 million and use that as your capital gain that goes into your fund. And then the other place is where you actually get the property from. And so if it comes from a related party, then, or if you owned it prior to December 31st, 2017, then it's not going to qualify. Now we've got a number of ways that we can get around that. We can either do a ground lease, or we can buy the property and we can have it be considered bad property. And so it'll sit in the 30% bad asset store. And then we do improvements in an amount that will get the 70%, on the property. And so we can deal with it that way. But so it's not out of the question to be able to get it done, but it certainly makes it a little bit more difficult.
All right. Well, go. Do you have more
do you want me to run down through these on the Q&A? So we own acreage located in a tenancy opportunity zone currently. Is it possible to set up our own QOF to develop the property? And so, like I just said, right? So that's I guess the direct question, and that might have been the same one, but you're going to end up having to do it. And it depends on when you bought it. So if you bought it after December 31st, 2017, in an LLC, then you unintentionally created a QOZB. And I come across those all the time where we then make it officially a QOZB. We drop, so you've got an LLC, you bought the property, and then what we do is we set up a QOF, we drop money into the QOF, we do an offering at the QOZB level, and then we take that cash and we do improvements with it. And now voila, you're good to go. If you owned it prior to December 31st, 2017, we're either going to have to ground lease it or roll it in as a bad asset into the 30% bad asset store.
Actually, this is so much better than watching John Madden.
He's pretty good, isn't he?
I can maybe do, so I don't even really know what you draw for football guys. I know that basketball players were always X's and O's. I think that football guys are the same, but anyhow.
Yeah, they're the same. I think we got time for one or two more questions. I do have James Brunger waiting at Capitol Square. He's going to be our next presenter starting in about 1 or 2 minutes here. But Matthew asks a really quick one here. Can a QOZB, a qualified opportunity zone business, be an LLC?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's usually what we typically tell people to do, is to set them up as an LLC taxed as a partnership. So the only thing that, a QOZB is basically just an entity, right, that raises its hand and says, hey, I'm willing to qualify and I'm willing to comply with these 5 rules over here. And I am now accepting opportunity fund capital from a capital gain. And so they then make themselves available. They do an offering to a QOF. And then as soon as the money comes into the QOZB, that's how they officially become a QOZB. Now, this kind of goes into the next question. What happens if a business moves out of an opportunity zone? So let's talk about that. And let's talk about it, not just moving out of an opportunity zone, but maybe it blows one of these other tests. So you get 1 6-month gimme. So you get the opportunity to blow this thing one time. And then after that, you cease to be an opportunity zone business. And then accordingly, if you're not an opportunity zone business, then your qualified opportunity fund is not going to, its investment in your qualified opportunity zone business is not going to count as a positive towards that 90% asset test. It's going to count as a negative. And so what that QOF would want is for the QOZB to buy its membership interest out. And then once the money comes back to the QOF has 12 months to reinvest it into another QOZB. Alternatively, if you're making investments at your own QOF level into QOZBs, you're going to want to have a put option, even if that put option is for $1, right? They buy you out, you post the loss, and you reinvest that $1 back into another QOZB. Then that's how you can preserve your status as for the investment.
Fantastic. Well, actually, I gotta cut you off there. Unfortunately, I gotta bring
Perfect.
James Brunger up on stage. There were a few unanswered questions. I've just posted them in the chat. If you want to hang around for a few more minutes and get to them in the chat section, please do so, Ashley. All right.
I can definitely do that. And
okay.
If anybody's got any further questions or they want to get involved in the compliance piece, go to ozpros.com, go to that education tab, and then sign up for the OZ Pros Compliance Bootcamp, and we're going to do a 90-minute call every Tuesday, and people will get access to that call, and they'll also get access to the recordings. So looking forward to seeing folks on that inside the bootcamp.
Fantastic. Well, Tobin Arthur from AngelMD, thank you for participating. Ashley Tison, my partner at OZ Pros, always great to see you. I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Thanks for
guys.
hopping on today, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jimmy.